Good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Uber, the Education Coordinator for the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center. We are happy to have you all here this morning and very pleased to bring you our newest webinar titled Funding Your Embryo Adoption Journey. Before we get started this morning, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation using the questions you submit through the Q&A feature. You may submit your questions at any time during the session, and we will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A panel in the lower right-hand portion of the screen, type your question into the dialog box, and click the Send button. If you happen to be in the full screen view, you can click on the question mark icon on the toolbar in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This will open a Q&A panel on your screen only. When you submit your question, it will be visible to all of the panelists, but not visible to other attendees. We expect this to be a shorter presentation today, which will last around 20 minutes with 10 minutes for questions. We will be distributing a copy of today's presentation with a comprehensive list of answers to any questions submitted today during the webinar, as well as a document that contains links and details about the programs mentioned in this webinar. Now, if you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, please contact WebEx Technical Support at 866-229-3239. And just as a reminder, the presentation is being recorded today. This morning we have Alyssa Trammell-McDonald joining us as a presenter. Alyssa is the team lead for the Snowflake's Embryo Adoption Program. She works with adoptive families throughout the adoption process as she oversees matching, contracts, and embryo shipment for families with the Snowflake's program. Alyssa has kindly agreed to help us present the webinar today. I know it is very near and dear to her heart to see more families be able to consider embryo adoption, and funding is definitely a big part of that. So, Alyssa, we're so happy to have you here this morning, and you are welcome to take over.
Good morning, Deb, and everybody else on the webinar. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm very excited for today's topic specifically because I know oftentimes the idea of embryo adoption may seem like a great option for your family until maybe you hear the price affiliated with it, and then it can seem a little bit more daunting. So today we're going to be going over the costs associated with embryo adoption and donation, and then going over various tools and methods you can use to help raise the funds for that, so that way your decision of whether or not to proceed with embryo adoption or donation is spurred more on a personal decision of what's best for your family rather than it coming down simply to a financial decision. So as I mentioned, getting started with embryo adoption is a big step for any family. That transition from, wow, this sounds very interesting, this could be a good fit to us, to, okay, let's do this. Let's start taking proactive steps. Let's start proceeding with the program of our choice for embryo donation or adoption. While the end goal of a baby may be in the forefront of your mind, there are still a few details that need to be worked out to get you there. Primarily, like we've mentioned, it can be the cost. So the costs that can go into an embryo donation or adoption will vary depending on which program you work with. Depending on the agency or the clinic, the costs for receiving donated embryos, so the agency fees or clinic fees, can be anywhere from $5,500 up to $9,000, depending on the program. These will cover a range of services, including the legal process, so transferring responsibility from the owners, from the donor family to the recipient family. It may include embryo transport, so getting the embryos from the fertility clinic where they were created to your fertility clinic that you're currently working with. It may include the matching process, so the process of finding a donor family whose embryos you will be receiving. And it can also include ongoing communication facilitation with the donors. So if you have chosen to have an open or semi-open relationship with the donor family, if you've chosen to have that facilitated by an agency, that may be included in the costs. So with all of those variables, I would encourage you to ask very specific questions of the program up front as far as the costs you can expect. Some of them are a flat fee, such as the Snowflake's program, where it's one flat fee. There may be discounts if you don't require certain services such as shipping, but overall it is a flat fee, whereas other programs, such as the National Embryo Donation Center, may have more of an a la carte menu, so piece by piece. You pay for the legal, and then if you'd like ongoing contact, then that's an additional fee. So it's good to ask clear questions from the beginning as far as what services you will be requiring and what the costs will be. That way, from the very beginning, you have an accurate idea of what the out-of-pocket cost is going to be to you. In addition to the program cost, there's also the home study or the family assessment cost to consider. Depending on the program, this may or may not be required, but several of the major embryo donation organizations in the country do require that. These costs can vary from $1,500 up to $3,500, depending on the agency you choose to work with for your services. This also does vary geographically, so in certain states it may be less expensive than in other states. Typically, states on the coast can be a little bit higher on the cost ranges. Finally, there's also the medical process. So this is the portion where you're working directly with your fertility clinic. So you'd want to look into the cost of frozen embryo transfer. So the process where they thaw the embryos and they are transferred to you. These can range from $3,000 to $6,000, and part of the reasons for these variations include the medications to prepare your body for the treatment. Your doctor will be able to advise you as far as the best medical regimen to prepare you for the transfer, and that may vary from person to person even if you're working with the same clinic. So you'd want to talk with them about your specific case and ask what the costs are, not only for the embryo transfer, but if the embryos need to be refrozen afterwards and stored, how much that will cost, how much the medications will cost, and also how much the aftercare will be. While they may quote you at a certain amount for the frozen embryo transfer, be sure to ask the cost of the ultrasounds and lab work afterwards. They will typically monitor you up to 10 to 12 weeks and check you on a week or semi-weekly basis just to make sure that things are on track, and that can come with an additional cost as well that may not have been quoted with the original FET estimate. So it's important to ask them exactly what those costs include so you know what amount of money you are needing to either fundraise or save up, depending on your approach. Snowflakes has created a spreadsheet, and while it is for helping to lay out the overall costs of your embryo adoption, this will vary from organization to organization. Even if you're not using Snowflakes, this can still be an incredibly helpful tool as it lays out very clearly the potential costs going into your embryo donation or adoption. So it is a spreadsheet. You can change the estimated cost to what has been quoted to you by the agency of your choice. And here it just lays out the grand total of all the fees associated with it. And then it's got a tracking column for you to track your actual cost. So for example, it may have been estimated that your frozen embryo transfer was $4,500, but it came out to $4,000, or perhaps it came out to $5,000. So this is a very clear laid out spot for you to just put everything down on paper as far as the costs associated. That way you have the expectation from the beginning and you know how to be financially preparing yourself. With that being said, most families simply do not have a spare $15,000, $20,000, or $12,000 lying around in their savings account. Some of it may be there. You may have a small amount set aside in savings, but you may not have the total fees. So the question then becomes, how are you going to cover the gap? How are you going to cover the difference between what you have in savings and what you worked out to be the estimated cost of the total process? As I mentioned, you can start with savings. So you may know that you want to adopt in the future, not necessarily right now. You can start building up that savings account. It does take time, so plan ahead to save according to your estimated timeline. When individuals and organizations know that you have planned out the process and you're being intentional to bring what you can to the table, they're more likely to feel secure in helping you gather the rest. This is also true of friends and family. If they see that you have already put a lot of effort into this, that you've already been intentional with your spending so that you can build up your savings, that also can be encouraging for others to help you. On the note of building up your savings, we always encourage families that every penny does count. It may seem very daunting to start saving an additional $100 a month or putting away a little extra each month, but it can be very helpful to look at what costs you can cut back on. It may be groceries, it may be clothes, it may be spending money on TV programs or going to the movies, eating out, and other types of entertainment. I know for me, mine was my gym membership, and whenever I'm saving up for something, my husband and I decided, you know what, getting bicycles actually turns out to be a lot cheaper, and we can go do that on our own time without a monthly membership fee. So you can look at various costs for your family and figure out which ones are the best for you to maybe cut out or scale back on. And you'd be very surprised at how quickly those little cuts can actually start to add up and help you grow your savings account. Once you've started saving, it always helps to start sharing your story. If you haven't shared your experience with infertility with friends and family, start sharing before you start talking about raising money. Start sharing with friends and family ahead of time. That will help prepare individuals to just know what's going on, and it helps them become emotionally invested in your goal. And it also gives them time for them to process through it and really wrap their minds around what you're doing, and really invites them into the experience and the process. So rather than beginning the whole conversation all at once of, we've chosen to pursue snowflakes. What is snowflakes? It's embryo adoption. Wow, I didn't even know you could do that. Yes, do you have money to contribute to that? You can see how that's actually a very rapid progression, and it may be a little bit much for friends and family to take in all at once. So an important part of your fundraising can begin with just starting the conversation and sharing with them that you're thinking about this, just so that way they know what's going on and they have time to invest in your story. Tell people that you are planning to start raising funds for your frozen embryo transfer or your embryo adoption before you start any type of campaign to raise funds for that. You can ask them for moral support and share your hope that they will share your campaign with their friends and social connections once it's ready to go. Again, this is preparing them ahead of time rather than giving them all of the information and asking for help all at once. Another option you can start looking into at this point is, as you're sharing your story and your hopes to pursue embryo adoption, is borrowing from a family member. You may have some family members that are interested in helping with a loan. Borrowing from family, it can be the best option or the worst option depending on your familial relationships and your connections with the specific people who are wanting to do the loaning, and also your ability to pay them back in a timely manner. With that, even though it's family members and it may seem like it's a casual arrangement, I would encourage you to set very clear and appropriate expectations as far as the repaying the amount. That way everybody is on the same page and they know what to expect as far as when the money will be returned and at what rate. That way there doesn't become any annoyance or even bitterness when expectations aren't met. But this can be a great option if you do have a comfortable and open relationship with them, but just like anytime money is involved, it can be a little bit tense as well. So that's really a case-by-case basis if that's a good fit for you for raising the money. So in addition to starting to build your own savings account and maybe exploring the option of having family members help you out, there are more traditional fundraising approaches. There's plenty of great ideas for unique fundraising projects online. All you need to do is type into Google adoption fundraising and you'll get lists and lists of ideas. Some of the more classic ideas for raising funds are hosting a spaghetti dinner. The amount of money that you invest in that versus the cost per person is actually a pretty significant difference, and that can help you raise money and also provides a great social event for people to connect and hear more about your story. You can also try selling cookie dough. You can host a Zumba party. I've had friends do that with great success. Or you could do a family movie night at the park and just do that on a donations-based foundation, so you can do that. You can also look online, as I mentioned, and find other options that may be a better or more accurate fit for you and your family. For example, if it's winter and it's snowing outside, a movie in the park might not be a great option for you, but you might find other options on there that are a better fit for where you're at currently. In addition to fundraising opportunities where you host an event or you're selling something, there's crowdfunding. I know that's a bit of a popular buzzword right now, and it seems like everybody's doing it, which can raise the question, okay, well, should I get into this? Should I do this? And the answer is yes. It can be a really great way to involve a lot of people at once in your process. It is important, though, to know what makes a successful crowdfunding campaign because, as I mentioned, you probably will not be the only one trying it. I'm sure we can all think of the top of our heads at least several people we know who have also done crowdfunding. So we are going to go over some steps of what can make your crowdfunding approach unique and really personal to your experience and help draw people into your story and give them an opportunity to partner with you through donations. So right now, we are going to go over the 3 common mistakes when setting up a crowdfunding page. Mistake number 1 can be trying to raise the full amount via crowdfunding. This option works best for working with large numbers of donors who will give small amounts. If the end goal is too high, most likely people will feel intimidated to give it all. And maybe they were thinking, oh, I'll give a larger amount, but wow, that still doesn't seem like it'll even make an impact if you're trying to raise this huge amount of money. And that can be true even more so if people are only able to give a small amount. So we encourage families to maybe aim for raising about 1/3 of their finances via crowdfunding. That makes it a much more manageable number, and it also makes people contributing feel like, you know what, my $20 is actually going to make a difference. If you're aiming to raise $6,000, then you know what, my contribution of $500 feels much more significant than if you were trying to raise the full $15,000 to $20,000 on your own. So I would encourage you to keep that amount small and manageable, and that way people can actually see their impact as they're contributing to it. That also goes back to making sure that you are building your savings so you can put some in as well towards your adoption fees, making it so you only need to raise about 1/3 through crowdfunding. Mistake number 2 of crowdfunding is creating a wonderful crowdfunding site, sharing your story, getting it all set up, ready to go. You've set your 1/3 amount, and then you forget about it. So as far as crowdfunding goes, it can almost seem too good to be true. You set up a website and people just flock to you and give you money, but that probably is a little bit too good to be true. You do get what you put into crowdfunding, and most of that will be from thoughtful posting and active attention. So you are going to want to tend to the crowdfunding throughout the process. You are going to want to post updates throughout. Maybe if this is going on during your embryo donation or adoption journey, you can do weekly posts of thank you so much for contributing. This is where we're at in the process. We're taking steps forward. That way the family is seeing that you are really involved with it. It also can be helpful to actually have some thank you gifts in place. So the third mistake can be forgetting to add a few tangible perks for larger donations. These are often forgot about as an option to pair with crowdfunding. And what you can do is your family can offer something handmade or crafty as a bonus gift for families and individuals who are chipping in larger amounts for your process. This gives you a reason to post multiple times when a new style has been made or a new gift has been made available, and it also helps set you apart. On this note, though, don't exhaust yourself. It should be more of a thank you gift than a purchase from the donors. So you can share with them, hey, donations over this amount, I'm making homemade T-shirts that I would be happy to send you one as a thank you gift. But frame it as a gift rather than, hi, if you spend X amount of money, you'll get this T-shirt. So just frame it as a thank you gift. And that may seem intimidating, or maybe you don't want to put the money into purchasing these reward systems, but which is why we encourage you to go homemade. You can make T-shirts for relatively low cost. You can make works of art. You can even make little cookies and mason jars. If you go on Pinterest, there are hundreds and hundreds of ideas of inexpensive but meaningful things that you can do. One other mistake that we didn't add on here that I'd like to bring attention to for crowdfunding is the importance of having an end date in sight. That can be a great motivator for people if they know, okay, the campaign is wrapping up. I've only got 2 days left to donate. Because I know myself, when I see a crowdfunding page for friends and family, I look at it and can very quickly dismiss it if I go, oh, well, you know what, they're not even leaving for that missions trip for 8 months. I'm in no hurry. Maybe my husband and I will look at our budget next month and see if we can contribute then. But if you put a clear-cut end date on it, that encourages families to act in a timely manner. I know when I see friends' pages that say, oh my gosh, it's ending in 24 hours, I got to get on this, I've got to donate. I know I've been suckered into many campaigns for that reason of wanting to get involved in the last minute, and that can be very helpful for families too, to put that end date so that way donors know, okay, it's now or never, got to make my decision, let's do this. So that can be a helpful portion for your crowdfunding as well. As far as crowdfunding sites, there is GoFundMe, and there are a few other ones as well. There actually are adoption-specific fundraising sites, though, as well. One that we work with is Adoption Bridge. It's geared specifically towards adoption, not just any cause that you can think of, and that can help add legitimacy to the site when family members and friends go to visit it. They see, okay, this is very clearly set up towards adoption, it's reputable, and we feel safe sending our money to this. We trust that it's going to go where it says it's going to go. So that can be a helpful option. It only allows you to raise up to 1/3 of your expenses, but as we discussed, this is a good thing because that does keep the amount more manageable for friends and family who are donating. As far as significant donations go, you may be contacted throughout the process of, you know what, we just really feel very passionate about this process and we want to help you maybe a little bit more than a $20 donation or a $50 donation. If there's someone who has already let you know that they're interested in providing a larger financial gift, direct them straight to the agency that you're working with rather than the crowdfunding site. Crowdfunding is helpful for small gifts from a large amount of donors, but if you know it's a single person who is going to be making a significant contribution, I would direct them straight to your agency. This is especially helpful if you're using a crowdfunding site that charges a portion of the amount that's donated to use the site. This can be helpful to avoid those processing fees because the money is going straight into the agency. So we've been talking about donations from friends, families, maybe acquaintances, and maybe this whole time you're thinking, okay, well, why would people even want to help fund my family building? That's great if people have the support net, but what about my story is specific? Why would people want to join in and partner with me in this? And the answer is pretty simple. It's just because they care. They care about you in your journey. They may care about infertility or have been impacted by it themselves. They may be very passionate about adoption or about embryo donation, and they may be very passionate about life, about giving frozen embryos a chance to be born. It could be one of these things. It could be a combination of all of them, but either way, these things are very powerful motivations in choosing to donate. If you're picturing crowdfunding as a bunch of strangers, maybe you just post something up on the internet and people stumble across your page, that's not always the case. As I've been using the language of friends and families throughout most of this presentation, your primary donations will come from friends and family, social media buddies. If you have a blog that you've been posting about your fertility and infertility journey, you may gather interest there, and you may get a little bit more from friends and family's social connections, and maybe a few people that you don't know at all, but you may be surprised by how many of the donations come directly from friends and family. I know it can be very hard to consider crowdfunding. It can be a little bit daunting and overwhelming. You know what, it isn't the right fit for everybody. There are several reasons that it might not be the best option for your family. The first one can be that if you're very private and you're not comfortable with everyone knowing about your struggles and what you've been through. That can be a process. I know not everybody is open to just putting their story up on the internet, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to keep that more private. That just means that crowdfunding probably won't be the best fit for you because crowdfunding, by definition, is inviting people into your story in a very public way. So that might not be the best option for you if that's the case. It also might not be the best fit for your family if you and your spouse are very uncomfortable with asking for money from people that you know and people you don't know. I know this can be different from family to family, but that can be a stress point as well. So those are both valid concerns, and we are still going to go over other options for fundraising or raising funds for your embryo donation or adoption. So no fear if you are in those categories. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Going back to that idea, though, of being afraid of asking, you know what, that's something that most families and individuals aren't comfortable with, the idea of asking for help, whether that be financial, emotional, or other forms of tangible support. It can bring up a lot of fears for everyone, be it that fear of rejection, that somebody might say, no, I don't want to give money to that cause, or it may bring up fear of looking weak by the fact that you are having to ask people for help with that. Or it may just be simply that you're worried about bothering people. And those are all very common concerns that come up for families. However, it's very helpful to realize that fundraising is a form of activism, and it helps bring awareness about adoption, infertility, and the need for families to give embryos a chance at the life they were created for. More importantly, it also gives families donating towards your cause a chance to support both you and your desire to adopt. Families are often looking for ways that they can help you in your journey, and this is a very tangible way that they can get involved. I know my husband and I often each year will set aside a lump sum of money to be donated and towards any cause that comes up. And so we'll wait and we'll kind of watch in our friend group, okay, who's what are the needs, and that varies from year to year, but it allows us to be involved with our friends' lives in a very tangible and helpful way when they give us the opportunity to ask or to chip in and help them. So over the years, that's gone towards helping a friend buy a new car because they needed that for their job. That's gone towards helping families with adoption. It's gone towards helping people go on missions trips. And I know you may feel very uncomfortable asking for money or sharing that you're fundraising, but just from somebody who's been on the giving end of that, it was an absolute joy for my husband and I to be involved in that and be able to take part and know, okay, we're not in a position where we can move overseas, but we can help somebody who is doing that. Or we're not currently in a position where we're moving forward with adoption, but we can help somebody who is doing that. And that was an incredible gift to us to be able to be involved. So I would just encourage you to view it that way, that you, through crowdfunding, are giving people a tangible way to help invest in a cause that may be very important to them. As they say, it does take a village to raise a child, and as I mentioned, that village wants to help. You may even have people come out of the woodwork who've been touched by infertility and adoption that you never knew about who are now looking for ways to be involved and are going to have that way of involvement be through helping you raise funds for your process. Now, we've been talking a lot about fundraising from friends and family members. There are also other options if you're not comfortable with that or that's not a good fit for your family. There are no interest loans for adoption and fertility treatments. So maybe you are wanting to take out a loan, but you're not wanting to take it out from a family member. There are several organizations here, and we do have more resources available upon request that we can send out after the presentation if you ask. But there are several organizations that give interest-free loans to help with the cause of adoption. These are specifically geared towards fertility treatments and embryo adoption. There are other grants that are available just for more traditional forms of adoption, but they don't always cross over to also helping with embryo donation and adoption. But these ones are specifically affiliated with the process of embryo donation and adoption and also fertility treatments. There are also grants and scholarships, so these are the good ones, the money you don't have to pay back. And depending on the organization that you go through, you may have to provide your infertility diagnosis, but that varies from organization to organization. So all of these are worth checking out as well. Again, we'll have these available afterwards as well. Also, you are going to want to check with your insurance carrier. We've been talking a lot about raising the money yourself, but a lot of insurance companies do cover some portion of fertility treatments. So they may not cover the fees associated with embryo donation and adoption. They may cover costs toward the frozen embryo transfer or the medications leading up to the transfer, and it's worth checking with your insurance carrier just what they cover and what they will be able to help out with. Also, you'll want to check with your fertility clinic. A lot of clinics do offer financing options for this medical treatment, including the frozen embryo transfer. Again, this wouldn't cover the agency fees if you're going through an agency for your embryo donation or adoption, but they may offer financing for the medical side of things. So the frozen embryo transfer, the medications leading up to the procedure, and things like that. So you may be able to spread out those payments over a period of time, and that might also help it make it possible for your family to move forward with this option. So those are the main tools for fundraising for your embryo donation and adoption to help make it possible for you and your family. We've gone over saving up money of your own. We've gone over crowdfunding and using websites to raise the funds from friends and family, hosting fundraising events such as a spaghetti dinner or other things that you may find online. Also grants or no interest loans to help out with that, and then also checking in to your insurance plans as well to see what those are. So as you can see from this presentation, there are many, many options available to help make it so that finances aren't the only thing holding you back from embryo donation or adoption. We will have all this information available. I know a lot of the websites went by pretty quick, but we will have that available afterwards if you'd like to look more into those options. Okay, that about wraps it all up. Deb, would you like to go over how to answer questions or ask questions and move forward with that?
Yeah, thanks so much, Alyssa. I'm going to go ahead and just jump over and take over and open it up for any questions that families have. I know sometimes there can be a few. If you'd like to submit questions, we have the instructions here. It'd just be on the lower right-hand portion of the screen that you can type it in and ask them there. And while you might be typing in any of those questions, I'm going to go ahead and share about some upcoming webinars. So we have a couple future events that you might want to be aware of. This next month, Wednesday, August 10th, we're going to have the fundamentals of embryo donation and adoption. This is one that we've done in the past, but we decided it was a good time to update it and revamp it since it's been a little bit since we've shared on this, and we're going to be giving an overview of the beginnings of embryo donation and adoption, defining terminology, and cover the overall process for families that are wanting to consider it but maybe not be sure quite yet. And then a little bit later that month, we're going to have one of our very popular webinars that we have on a quarterly basis, Embryo Donation and Adoption Open Mic Night, and that's going to be on Wednesday, August 31st. That's just a great webinar, especially if you have a lot of questions on your own. You can just show up, and that is, we have a brief overview of the process, but then after that, we just open up the floor for any questions that families have about the process, whatever that looks like. And even if you don't have a lot of questions yourself, sometimes signing on really helps because other families will definitely bring some that you might not have even thought of. And then the last resource you might want to consider is helping families find a Pathway to Family. It's a great magazine that you can look into on pathwaytofamily.com. You can get a free copy there. And it's just a great magazine that gives an overview of just embryo donation and adoption, some great tips, and would be a great resource that I would encourage you looking into. Let me see if we have any questions that came in. And Alyssa, let me know if you see any that come in as well. All right. How do the costs of embryo adoption compare with other forms of adoption? I'm sending this just over in general about the regular adoption process.
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked a lot about variable costs within embryo donation and adoption itself from program to program, but we didn't really touch on how that compares to more traditional forms of adoption. In general, it is significantly cheaper than other forms of adoption. Domestic infant adoption is probably the closest with expenses. That will vary on the agency that you work with or if you work with an attorney for that process. Those are typically $25,000 and up as far as the costs affiliated with that. International adoptions a little bit more expensive than that, normally starting around $30,000 and going up from there depending on the country that you are adopting from. I know that seems like maybe an absurd amount of money and people are always a little bit shocked when they hear that, but it's important to keep in mind how many people are involved in the adoption process in those types of adoption. So with embryo donation or adoption, from a legal perspective, it is considered a property transfer. That makes the legal side of things a lot less intensive, which helps keep the cost down. It also involves less people in the coordination process. You are not working with state and government officials on top of everything like you are with domestic adoption or especially international adoption, when you're not only working with United States requirements, but also the country that you're adopting from's requirements. So that's the reason for the very steep cost increase for the other types as compared to embryo donation and adoption. It is worth mentioning that foster care is significantly less expensive or at no cost to the parents. That is unique, though, in that typically that is a less stable form of adoption. The goal with foster care is providing a temporary home for children with the goal that the child will be reunified with their biological family, whereas other forms of adoption are with the goal of being a more permanent placement. So that's just a brief overview of the other types of adoptions and their costs.
Mm-hmm. I saw another one come in. Have you ever had a family pay the whole amount from grants, fundraising, et cetera, that kind of stuff?
We have had families where a family member has paid for the entire process, and in that case, it was their parents, I believe, who helped them with that. They were just in a financial position where they could help their children build their family this way. As far as fundraising goes, I have not seen the entire amount. I have seen close to the entire amount raised through fundraising, but I have not personally seen the entire amount through that. However, the family could have done private fundraising and then had the money go straight into their bank account, and that way the check came straight from them, so we wouldn't know. But to my awareness, I haven't seen the entire amount, but that doesn't mean it's never happened.
All right. We're just a little bit over time that we had been planning for, so I'm going to go ahead and close down the webinar. I don't see any other questions coming in, but I hope that's helpful for everybody that's joined today, and thank you so much for joining us and learning about, just different ways you can fund your embryo adoption journey. And thank you so much, Alyssa, for helping us have this webinar shared.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a great day.